She cut the lock on his gate and let strangers throw a backyard party on his private property because she thought she could. Karen, the overbearing HOA president, believed her self-appointed power outweighed both personal boundaries and federal law. But Jake Harper didn't raise his voice. He followed protocol. And soon it wasn't just neighbors watching. It was the Department of Defense. But just wait until you hear how this neighborhood standoff took a shocking turn and why in the end justice came down hard and silent. Jake Harper pulled into his driveway just after sunset, his uniform still stiff from the day's heat. After 12 hours of protocols, checklists, and secure zones, home was supposed to feel like sanctuary. Familiar, predictable, safe. But something felt off. As he stepped out of his truck, the stillness struck him first. Not the peaceful kind, but the wrong kind. The kind that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. His eyes automatically scanned the perimeter, a habit too deeply ingrained to ignore. And that's when he saw it. The back gate wide open. Jake's boots hit the pavement before he even finished processing the thought. That gate led to a narrow fenced-in access lane, technically part of his property, but rarely used. He'd installed a reinforced padlock just 3 weeks earlier after catching a couple of teenagers trying to sneak through. No one had permission to use it. No one should have even been near it. And yet, there it was swinging gently in the breeze. The lock wasn't broken. It wasn't even damaged. It was just gone. Jake's heart rate kicked up, but his steps remained steady as he moved toward the side of the house. That's when he heard it. Music pop. Music, then laughter, voices. Someone yelled, "Hey, pass me the guac." Turning the corner, the full picture snapped into view. His backyard had been completely taken over. 2 vehicles, a silver SUV and a dusty black pickup, were parked on the gravel pad behind his house. 6 strangers were lounging around like they were in a public park. A woman in a sun hat dipped her feet in his pool. A couple of kids chased each other with pool noodles. Shoes kicked off near his flower beds. And at his grill, a man flipping burgers like it was some neighborhood cookout. Jake didn't shout, didn't demand answers. He just stood there taking it all in. The smell of cheap beer and charcoal drifted toward him. Someone had moved the cushions on his patio furniture. There were crumbs everywhere. "Who are you?" he finally asked, voice low but sharp. The man at the grill barely looked over his shoulder. "Karen's guest," he said, still holding the spatula. "She said we could park here and chill for a bit. Hope that's cool." Jake blinked. Karen? As in Karen Holloway, president of the Homeowners Association. The same woman who once left a laminated note on his door because his garden hose wasn't the approved neutral color. She gave strangers permission to cut through his property to use it. The disbelief hit like a cold slap. Not anger, not yet. Just the jarring realization that something profoundly wrong had happened. While he was gone, Jake didn't move, didn't speak. He just looked at his grill, at the footprints by his pool, at the empty spot where the lock should have been. Slowly, his military instincts kicked in. The training to assess, to prepare, to respond. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a violation. And Karen had no idea just how far she crossed the line. Jake Harper had pegged Karen Holloway from the moment he moved into the neighborhood. She was that kind of HOA president, the kind who didn't just enforce rules, she weaponized them. The kind who walked around with a clipboard and a measuring tape like grass height was a matter of national security. She once sent out a 4-page memo because someone left their trash bins out too long. Jake hadn't taken it personally. He chalked it up to suburban power syndrome, the need to feel in control of something. But this wasn't a passive-aggressive email or an overzealous rule about mailbox colors. This was his backyard. Used, occupied, violated by strangers who didn't even live in the zip code. Still, Jake didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten anyone. That wasn't his style. He simply asked them to leave firmly with no room for debate. A few of them looked sheepish. One kid mumbled an apology. The man at the grill grabbed his cooler and left without making eye contact. As the last car backed out, Jake walked straight inside, locked the doors, and pulled up footage from his security cameras. The rear-facing one had the perfect view of the back gate. And there she was, Karen. Visor, tennis skirt, that permanent scowl she always wore, like it was part of her face. In one hand, bolt cutters. In the other, nothing. No clipboard, no knock on his door, no attempt to reach out, just raw, smug host certified audacity. She approached the gate, adjusted her stance, and snip. The lock gave way like it was made of licorice. She didn't even look around. She knew what she was doing, and by her posture she clearly believed she had every right. Jake sat there watching, jaw tight, hand clenched loosely around the mouse. It wasn't rage, not even disbelief anymore. It was something colder, mechanical. A switch flipped. Karen had crossed a line she didn't even know existed. She thought this was about fences and neighborhood parking etiquette. She thought the HOA gave her power. But Jake knew better. Where she saw neighborhood politics, he saw a security breach. Where she saw common area access, he saw unauthorized tampering with a federally protected easement. She had no idea what she'd done, but she would. The sun wasn't even high when Jake walked across the street, his footsteps deliberate and even. He didn't rehearse a confrontation. He didn't need to. He rang the bell and waited. Karen opened the door in a pastel pink robe, holding a mug that said #1HOQueen. Fitting. She looked surprised just for a moment. Then the smirk returned. Jake, she said, brightly, like they were old friends. Meeting for brunch. He cut straight to, you cut the lock on my back gate. Karen blinked once, sipped her coffee, and shrugged. I had every right to. That gate faces the rear community access path, which makes it common property. You can't just lock it up. It's not yours to block. Jake didn't flinch. That gate is on my parcel line, he said calmly. I installed it. I maintain that ground and that community path. It's not for public use. It's a designated military emergency lane. It's federally protected. She scoffed like he just accused her of trespassing on Area 51. That's HOA land. It's part of our neighborhood layout. You're overstepping. Jay cut in tone, flat but edged with ice. I have full documentation. The easement is military infrastructure. I have permits. You cut a lock on federal adjacent property and let unauthorized civilians through it. Karen rolled her eyes unfazed. Oh, come on. It's not like it's a missile silo. You're just trying to intimidate people with your job. It's a little gate, Jake. No need to blow it out of proportion. There it was. The classic dismissal. If she downplayed it enough, maybe it would shrink into nothing. If she smiled sweetly enough, maybe the world would bend to her HOA logic. Jake didn't argue. There was nothing more to say. She was wrong. Legally, blatantly, boldly wrong. But more importantly, she was too entitled to realize it and far too proud to admit it, even if she did. He looked at her one last time, nodded once, and turned to leave. Let her enjoy her coffee. To the untrained eye, it was just a gate. 6 feet of powder-coated Steel set in a reinforced frame with a digital padlock and weather-sealed hinges. Clean lines, no frills, just a gate. But Jake knew and had the documentation to prove it was much more than that. When he bought the house 3 years ago, one of the main selling points had been its proximity to the service lane, that narrow strip of pavement running behind a few of the eastern properties wasn't listed as a public walkway. It wasn't even maintained by the city. It belonged to a federal easement designated for emergency and military response access. Jake hadn't taken any chances. Before installing the gate, he'd gone through every official channel. Permit from the city, check. Surveyor's map showing property boundaries, check. Inspection. Approval for structure and placement, check. But the most important signature came from the base itself. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Reyes, logistics officer, had personally signed off on Jake's gate, with a memo stating that private access points into the emergency lane may be maintained by property owners provided no obstruction of operational response occurs. Jake filed copies with the city, kept one in his home safe, and submitted another to the HOA long before Karen ever picked up a gavel. So no, this wasn't about a backyard shortcut. This was about interference with restricted infrastructure. When Karen cut that lock, she didn't just cross a property line. She entered a zone that by federal definition was considered critical operations adjacent, and by allowing her guests to use it as a parking area and party entrance, she'd unintentionally turned it into a potential security risk. Jake didn't want to make it personal. He didn't need to. This wasn't about hurt feelings or neighborhood drama. This was about protocol. And Jake had spent a decade in uniform learning exactly what to do when protocol was breached. So he sat down at his desk, opened a blank incident form, and started writing. He attached the security footage that documents the date, time, and nature of the breach. And by the time he hit send, the report was in the hands of the base physical security office, flagged as a civilian interference event involving federal access infrastructure. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to knock on Karen's door again. He had done exactly what the system trained him to do. Report, record, act. And now, the system would answer. The van turned the corner of the quiet cul-de-sac without a sound. It wasn't marked like a police cruiser, nor flashy like a tactical unit, just a clean matte gray government vehicle with a single black decal on the door. US Department of Defense. Infrastructure security. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Lawnmowers shut off mid-track. Someone's dog barked once, then stopped. 2 officers stepped out, boots first. Their uniforms weren't for show. No weapons drawn, no sunglasses, no dramatic movements, just calm, professional presence. Their jackets bore simple patches. Federal Security Access Enforcement. Jake was already outside waiting, arms crossed over his chest, posture relaxed but alert. The kind of stance that said, I've done my part. The rest is yours, The taller officer nodded once and held out a clipboard for Jake's signature. Paperwork. Verification, a quick exchange of phrases. They didn't ask Karen anything. They didn't need to. While one officer examined the gate structure and rechecked the access alignment against a printed satellite overlay, the other opened a small black case. Out came the hardware. A reinforced aluminum warning sign with bold white lettering asterisk. Asterisk restricted access. Military. Infrastructure violators subject to federal penalties asterisk asterisk. And just above it, a sleek solar-powered, motion-triggered surveillance camera. Silent watching, bolted into the post. Laser leveled, secured. No drama, no raised voices, just the law quietly installing itself across the street. Karen stood stiffly on her front porch, arms crossed in a perfect imitation of defiance, though her expression betrayed her. That forced smile, the subtle shift of weight, the way her lips tightened when she saw the words federal penalties. She wasn't fooling anyone. Neighbors had come out too slowly, carefully. Some lingered by their mailboxes. Others just happened to water their lawns while sneaking glances toward Jake's yard. Phones came out not in secrecy either. People were recording, but they weren't watching Jake. They were watching her. And Jake. He didn't say a word, didn't gloat, didn't look in her direction, didn't nod in satisfaction. He just stood there, hands behind his back like he was back on duty, and let the uniforms do what they came to do. Because this moment wasn't about revenge. It was about order, being restored by the book, by the badge, by the bolts drilled into steel. And the message was unmistakable. This was no longer a neighborhood disagreement. This was federal ground. Now the notice arrived in a standard government-issued manila envelope, unassuming but unmistakable, stamped in bold clean ink. US Department of Defense, Office of Civilian Infrastructure Compliance. Delivered via certified mail with required signature. Not the kind of letter anyone in a suburban HOA expects to receive. It was addressed to the full Oakage Meadows Homeowners Association board and contained exactly 3 pages. No pleasantries, no fluff, just cold bureaucratic precision and the weight of the federal government behind every sentence. Jake didn't attend the meeting where it was first read. He didn't need to. He already knew what it said. After all, he'd written most of the report that led to it. The letter began with a recap of the incident. An HOA officer allegedly authorizing civilian use of an access lane, followed by physical tampering with an installed gate and unauthorized entrance onto privately maintained federal adjacent property. Then came the legal clarification. Eastern Service Lane adjoining Mr. Harper's property is classified as emergency military infrastructure, access EMIA, and falls under restricted jurisdiction. At no point is this lane to be used for community, civilian, or recreational purposes. It is not under HOA control. For anyone in the room still clinging to Karen's narrative that it was just a harmless community path, that line hit like a slap. But the letter wasn't done. The incident, involving the removal of a lock and the admittance of unauthorized civilian guests, constituted interference with protected infrastructure. Any further unauthorized access, obstruction, or modification would result in escalation to legal action under Title 18, Section 1382 of the U.S. Code. And there it was, the polite version of next time someone's going to court. No names were used. No direct accusations were made. But everyone sitting in that boardroom knew exactly who the letter was about. Karen sat at the head of the table, shoulders squared, lips pressed into thin practice line. She was still in her role, still in her HOA president blazer, with the gold lapel pin. But something had changed. Her confidence had cracks. Her eyes weren't scanning the room like usual, searching for support. They were fixed straight ahead, as if avoiding everyone else's judgment might somehow erase it. The board read the letter in silence. Even the usual chatterboxes, the ones who once argued for 20 minutes about patio umbrella colors, sat like school children in front of a principal. No one spoke until Mark Peterson, the treasurer, finally leaned forward and broke the stillness. Are we going to be fined because of her? It wasn't really a question. It was a shift, a turning point, the unspoken moment when the Crowd quietly steps away from the person at the center of the fire. Karen didn't answer. She couldn't, because any answer would have been an admission of guilt, of failure, of ignorance, and Karen Holloway didn't do admissions. But the silence said enough. The board moved on. Quietly, carefully. The letter was filed. A note was added to the next agenda. Clarify HOA jurisdiction. Boundaries. No one defended her actions. No one mentioned the party. No one even asked about the lock. They were already distancing themselves one legal phrase at a time. And Jake, he sat on his porch that evening, watching as the HOA meeting led out across the street. Board members exited with tight smiles and quick glances, barely pausing to speak. Karen came out last alone. No clipboard, no smug wave, no proclamation, just her clutching a folder to her chest like it might protect her from what came next. Jake didn't wave, she didn't look his way, but he could feel the shift in the air. Not anger, not revenge, just quiet, definitive consequence, the kind written in statute, notarized, and signed in triplicate. It didn't happen overnight, but it didn't take long either. At first, it was just whispers, the kind that drift across driveways and lawns like spring pollen. Did you hear what she did to that gate? I thought that path was private. She let strangers into someone's yard. Seriously? Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs turned into passive glances. Then came the polite but icy smiles at block gatherings. The kind you offer strangers, not someone who's lived 3 doors down for 7 years. Karen felt it immediately, though she pretended otherwise. She still walked her dog on schedule, still wore her HOA badge to Saturday trash pickups, still dropped off newsletters with bullet points in bold. But the greetings stopped. People no longer lingered when she waved. Some crossed the street altogether. Others gave a curtain nod, nothing more. It wasn't open rebellion. Didn't need to be. It was exiled by indifference. And then quietly something began to circulate. A single-page form tucked into mailboxes. No name at the top, no email, just bold print. Petition for removal of current HOA president. Beneath it, a short paragraph citing repeated boundary overreach, unauthorized actions against private property, and endangerment of community reputation through legal exposure. Signatures optional. Anonymous drop-off encouraged. Jake saw it one evening, half sticking out of his mailbox like a paper tome. He read it once, folded it back, and placed it neatly inside. He didn't sign it. He didn't need to. The neighborhood had already spoken, some louder than others, like the Taylor Down, the block who returned their HOAs pending reorganization, or Mrs. Nash, who tore out the compliance flowers Karen had once demanded she plant. But most spoke in silence. They stopped attending meetings, stopped reading the newsletters, stopped pretending Karen still held authority. And slowly, without fanfare, the air changed. The quiet dominance Karen once commanded. The subtle flinches when she walked by. The nervous compliance all dissolved, like fog under sunlight. One afternoon, Jake was watering his lawn when he saw her on her porch, unscrewing the small brass plaque that had hung there since her election 3 years ago. HR. President Karen Holloway. She didn't do it ceremonially. No sigh, no dramatic pause. Just 2 quick turns of a screwdriver and it was gone. She didn't look around, didn't say a word. She just turned and walked back inside. And the plaque never came back up. There were no announcements, no formal statements, no official handover of power, but no one needed one. The message was clear, plain as an empty porch wall. She was done. Not because she was removed, Because no one followed anymore. The new lock wasn't just a replacement. It was a message. Jake installed it himself over the course of a quiet Saturday morning. No announcements, no drama, just clean work, measured steps, and the soft hum of a power drill. This time it wasn't a standard padlock. It was a military electronic access system tied directly into his home's broader security grid. The gate now opened with a 6-digit keypad code or facial recognition synced to a secure server. Every entry logged, every attempt recorded above it, mounted in perfect alignment with the camera installed by the federal team. Jake added one more element, a black and white aluminum sign riveted cleanly into the steel private military access. Do not enter monitored 24/7. Asterisk. The letters were bold, cold, and final. No interpretation, no ambiguity. This was no longer a gate someone might assume they could pass through. It was a line, a border, a statement. And from that day on, no one touched it. Not neighbor, not teenager, not well-meaning dog walker. Even the wind seemed to keep its distance. Karen saw it. Of course, everyone did. The whole block noticed. It gleamed in the afternoon sun like a silent sentinel. The end of an argument no one dared reopen. She still walked her dog, but the route changed. She avoided the side of the block where Jake's yard backed onto the lane, took the long way around, even when it meant 3 extra turns. And if she happened to pass by when Jake was out front, no eye contact, no wave, not even the fake smile she used to flash like a warning light. The HOA never brought it up again. Not at the next meeting, not in the monthly bulletin, not even in whispers. It became one of those understood things, like the street that always flooded in spring or the neighbor whose roses no one dared critique. Everyone just knew. The gate stood untouched. Jake's cameras kept blinking and peace, structured, quiet, unmistakable peace settled back over the neighborhood like a weighted blanket. Not because people were afraid, but because for the first time in a long time they respected the line. Order hadn't shouted its return. It had locked. It encoded, sealed, and watched from above. Jake Harper was never one for drama. He hadn't joined the military to bark orders or prove a point. He never chased titles, never cared for small town power circles, and certainly never planned to become the center of any neighborhood saga. All he ever wanted was simple privacy, security, and peace of mind. A quiet house, a clear perimeter, a life where the rules were clear and the boundaries respected. And, in the end, that's exactly what he got. Not by raising his voice, not by retaliating with petty moves or matching Karen's arrogance with his own, but by doing what he always did, staying calm, staying exact, following the code. He let the evidence speak. Let the documents move through the channels they were meant to move through. Let the law, slow, steady, and absolute, carry the weight that emotion never could. The neighborhood learned something in the process, not just about federal easements or property lines, but about how real consequences don't always arrive with sirens or shouting. Sometimes they come in manila envelopes, sometimes in silence and ignored meetings and changed walking routes. Jake didn't gloat. There were no smug smiles or passive-aggressive notes taped to anyone's door. He trimmed his hedges, washed his truck, watered his lawn, and every now and then he glanced at the gate. Still locked, still silent, still untouched. It wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about restoration, about things returning to their rightful place. Karen would never admit it, of course, but she didn't have to. Her silence said more than any apology ever could. Because justice, the real kind, isn't always loud. It doesn't have to bang the table or announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes justice is just the quiet that follows a storm, the calm of knowing the boundary you drew is finally seen and respected, that you don't have to fight anymore. Jake sat on his porch that evening, the air still, the sun slipping behind the rooftops. No shouting, no letters, just the sound of sprinklers, a few houses down, and the low buzz of the keypad security light glowing green behind the fence. And in that silence was the sweetest justice of them.